ideally now, right? So if prices are not like, what is impermanent loss? It's impermanent loss is like asset A, asset B, asset A overperforms asset B, or asset B underperforms, depending on how you want to look at it. Then during those times is what people think of as impermanent loss, right? So if psychologically somebody's not used to investing, if they're scared of impermanent loss, they don't fully understand the pieces of it, doing it at a time now where the market's just sideways and choppy, this is like ideal, right? If it's going up, then you're going to deal with more adjusting your position as well as impermanent loss, right? But if you do an intelligent strategy, then it's going to be somewhat, in my opinion, somewhere between 0 and say maybe 20, 30% of your portfolio to put it in here. Wow. One way you can go through here and find information. So this is info.uniswap.org. If anybody wants to check this out, you can search, right? So we search for HEX here. We can pull HEX up. It gives you the volume, the TLV, and the price, right? And then we come down here, we get to see the pairs. And one of the interesting ones that I want to point out here is the hexahedron pair here. So I think this is the right one. Okay, yeah, perfect. Okay, so this is the hexahedron pair, right? So then you're like, I don't give a shit if I have hedron or hex. I like both of those things. So I'll provide liquidity between both of these things. Now, you're not necessarily going to earn as much fees as you would in, say, a USDC pair or an Ethereum pair, because there's barely any volume between hex and hedron, right? It's more so if the ratio is off, a bot is going to correct it, right? They're going to, so if you look back here, these are all pairs with hex, right? So one way to think about this is there are 10, and this is one of 5 pages. So there are, on this page, there are 10 different prices for hex. So the opportunistic person or the bot is going to go through and buy the cheapest on here and sell the most expensive, which will happen in this, right? That if there's a ratio off somewhere, the bots will do this, or if there's overflow, meaning if somebody's going to sell or buy $1 million, a million hex, right? But the one pair doesn't have enough liquidity in it, there's an auto router in V3. So this will route you through V2 pools too. So you had talked about like V2 and V3, like you could just implement PulseX with a V3, right? Version. So there's a router on here. I think they came out with in December 2021, where if there's not enough liquidity in there, or if it's appropriate for whatever reason, the routing of your trade will go through a V2 pair if it provides better price execution for you. So that happens, and you can earn fees. They're just not necessarily going to be as much as they would be if it was, say, a exit liquidity pair like Ethereum, like USDC, if it was paired with Tether or things like that, where you can get out of the asset. But one of the interesting things that you look at when you understand this stuff is you're like, okay, the TLV, the total value locked here between hex and hedron is $2.35 million, right? So this is going to fluctuate in 2 different ways. It's going to fluctuate with the prices, right? Because if you have 65 million hex in here, and hex goes from 2.5 cents to 3.5 cents, if this number stays the same, then the value, the TLV here, will increase because the asset has more. This is one of the 2 reasons why the liquidity grows in bull markets, because prices are higher. That means the value, the TLV locked, goes up in value. The other reason TLV goes up or fluctuates is individuals acting in their own self-interest, because then they're going to add money to this pool or take money away from this pool, right? So if it's ceteris paribus, meaning everything stays the same, 65 million goes up or down based on if I decide to add money to this pool or take money away from this pool. But one of the things you can actually tell when you look at this, right? Because most people don't. They just see TLV. of 2.5 million. Like, oh, wow, that's a lot of liquidity. But check this out. This is where the current price is, the pink line here. Look at this giant block over here, right? So this is a bunch of hex, it looks like, right? That is waiting to be sold for Hedron. And so you're like, okay, 2.5 million from a LP standpoint. I should have led with this. If you want to earn fees, what do you need to look for, right? Some things to look for are the amount of fees generated over a 24-hour period. I have a ratio that I like to think about. And I can pull up Deck Screener after this and show you, but if the ratio of fees over the last 24 hours is greater than the liquidity, that's probably a good place to look at, because then that's like, okay, if there's $1 million of liquidity and there's $1 million of USD volume of in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out between two pairs, then that means your money could work for you really quickly, right? And speed in business and stuff is what allows you to earn more fees. Right? So that's one thing to look for. So if somebody looks at this and they say zero volume over the last 24 hours, because overflow is not going to show up in here from my understanding, and it's got $2.5 million, you're like, okay, I'm not going to really earn anything in this. But when you actually look at liquidity, you see that the vast majority of liquidity is this giant block that's just sitting here not doing anything, not earning fees. So in reality, if this is represented as in the 2.35 million, say if this is 1.35 million, then that means the TLV is actually only 1 million, because most of this is not earning any fees, right? I don't know if this is too far down the rabbit hole of this stuff.
No, just a question on this too, just for people watching. What are those big blue candles?
This would think of it as like, so Richard Hart could do this, or anybody who has a giant amount of money and wants to do this to manipulate prices, right? Because in crypto, remember, it's legal to manipulate things. It happens all the time. Somebody could dump a boatload of an asset here. Say this, I don't know for sure, but say this was if Hex drops down this way. And you're like, well, I don't want Hex to drop below where it was at the, bottom 2 years ago or something, right? Or whatever thing is, right? You're like, I don't want it to drop below this price. So if you look at the blue line here, you can think of this as, say, like running on the beach, right? Sandy, right? But it can still move around pretty quickly on the beach, right? It's not like really thick sand. You can get around pretty easy. This in the deeper blue area here is like trying to run in waist deep water. It slows the price down drastically, right? So if somebody wants to keep the price where it is, right, and they have to have a large amount of capital to infuse, and you have to want to be able to do this, and you can infuse all this capital, large amount of capital relative to the size of the pool, right? So as the pools grow, the number of people who can go through and manipulate them in this fashion decreases, right?
So these are essentially buy walls and sell walls when you see stuff like
this. Yes, sir. Exactly. But this is a representation that you get to see in a visual, like histogram. You know what I mean? You're like, okay, this is what it actually looks like in real life.